All right, that was some really critical testimony. I'm here alongside criminal defense attorney Andell Brown. He breaks down on the stand, and then he talks about when he met with Tex McIver following Diane's death, Tex's reaction to finding out that his wife didn't have as much money as he thought she did. Do you think that's key?
Well, I think that's a big deal, Rachel. When we look at this case, a lot of the issues here revolve around money and finances, Texas finances and Diane's finances. The motive that the state is saying he has for taking her life is he was trying to get this money. So imagine the shock after he's gone through all of this to find out she doesn't have as much money as he thought.
So does that mean he killed her on purpose, though? I mean, come on.
I mean, that by itself doesn't prove that, but I think what he's trying to say is that he obviously thought there was a lot more money there. Because their finances were separate, she kept whatever she was doing separate from what he was doing. He didn't know, how much money she had. He just knew that she owned the properties, she owned this, she owned that, and now he has this shocking revelation that all the money that was supposed to be there isn't there.
So this really plays into the prosecution's theme, I guess you could call it, or motive for this case, in that Tex killed Diane because he was after her money.
That's what they're saying, and I think that's what this witness is there to show on their behalf.
And you know what? I think this guy, Terry Brown, who's the victim's executive assistant. Now, remember, she was a very high profile. Everyone keeps saying a prominent attorney that's being tried for murder. Well, his wife, the one he killed, was also very prominent in the community. She was an executive. The prosecution says she was worth $12 million. I guess that includes her property value if they were to liquidate everything. What do you make of this case? Because I'm struggling with the murder charge here. He says it was an accident, hair trigger on the gun. Could happen.
It's possible. You know what? This case is a classic case of shut up and let your attorney do their job. I think if Tex McIver hadn't made all the statements and done all the things after Diane's death, it would have been a much tougher case for the prosecution. A lot of the evidence that they're introducing or they're going to introduce will come from the different people that will testify. He tried to manipulate testimony. He tried to silence people. He tried to get people to change their stories. He changed his stories several times. If he didn't do all of those things, I think the defense would have a much stronger position to say that this was just an accident. The prosecution, really, their strongest piece of evidence is all the things he did after Diane died, all the things he said, all the actions he took.
So what's the most damning to you as you look at this case in terms of what he did after the death of his wife?
Well, I think as a defense attorney, you can always explain, giving different statements to doctors and nurses. He's not under oath. This is a traumatic event. I think when you tell the best friend and the message that he leaves on the phone saying, hey, don't say the things that she's saying. This stuff can land me in jail. Delete this message when you're done. When he says to one of the publicists that has a relationship with the district attorney there in Atlanta that you can get this case dismissed and there's a big bonus in it for you, and I wouldn't mind if you shared some of that with the district attorney there. I think those things make it appear that this is a guilty person trying to cover their tracks.
Well, it'll be very interesting if so Tex McIver and I spent a couple of years in Atlanta as a reporter, so I know kind of the players very well there. And I can tell you, Tex McIver has hired an all-star team of defense attorneys. They're the best of the best in the Atlanta area, Bruce Harvey and the others that he has there on the team. Did you get a chance to see the defense's openings, or at least read about them and maybe see some clips of them? What did you think of them?
Well, I thought the defense's openings were pretty standard. If there was any criticism I would give, it was when his defense attorney said in her opening statement that there's not going to be any evidence that the state can present that this was not an accident. I think you want to be more affirmative in your defense statement this was an accident. It's not that the state can't prove this was anything other than an accident. You don't want to rely on, well, the state doesn't have enough evidence or they can't meet the burden. You want to affirmatively tell the jury that your client is not guilty, this was an accident, and that's what the evidence is going to show.
Andell, stick around with me for a few minutes in case folks miss those defense openings. I want to play a couple of clips from them so you can get a sense of where the defense is going to go with this case. Of course, they're contending this was all one big accident.
Now, in Ms. McIver's office, was there a bathroom? Was there a restroom or bathroom?
Yes.
Was it her own personal bathroom?
Yes.
Okay. And inside, I'm going to show you what's been marked and already admitted as stated Exhibit 139. What are we looking at? Tell the jury what we're looking at here.
Those are the file cabinets in her bathroom.
Okay. And did anybody have access to those?
No.
And who had access to those?
Only her.
Okay. And did they always remain locked?
Yes.
Okay. And you worked with her for over 6 years. What did she keep in those?
That's where she kept all of her important papers. That's what she told me, so I believed her. I was only in those cabinets once in 6 years.
Did you were only in that cabinet once in 6
Right.
years? And she trusted you?
Right.
Okay. Tell the jury how you felt about Ms. McIver.
Object to the relevance. I don't understand kind of the framework of general feeling about.
Well, I think given some of the motions that have been filed, this is an appropriate question.
May I continue to?
Sure.
You can answer the question.
I thought the world of her. I mean, she was very good to me. I was very good to her. We got along very well. It was a great relationship.
Did you stand up to her at times?
I sure did.
Okay.
Yes.
And could she have a sharp tongue?
Yes, she could.
The objection, leading, and I think the question is argumentative.
Okay, I'll allow it. Overruled.
And tell the jury a little bit about what you mean by sharp tongue.
Well, you're the one who used the phrase. So, why don't you ask a different question?
Okay. Tell the jury how Ms. McIver interacted with a lot of people.
She had a very, very strong personality. And she was a very controlling. Controlling is not the word. She had a very strong personality. She was a very dominant woman. She had to be. I mean, she worked in a man's world, and she was a very dominant woman. But she could also be very friendly. So, I mean, don't take that in the wrong way. But when it comes to business, there was no fooling around with Diane. None. It was her way or the highway.
And was that the attitude she had with all people?
I kind of saw a different side of her. I mean, my relationship with her was a little bit different. So she wasn't like that with everybody. But no, she was a very dominant woman. I guess with everybody, but she did have a side that wasn't always so dominant.
Okay. Tell the jury a little bit about how your relationship was different with her and with other people.
Well, we just interacted differently. You know, I'm also a pretty dominant personality as well. So we took us a little bit to work through some of that. But once we got a handle on it, we respected each other. So my treatment was a tad bit different because of my personality. And once we figured it out, then it just made it very easy for us to interact. And she knew I would stand up for myself.
And is that why the relationship lasted as long as it did?
I think it probably had a good bit to do with it, yes.
Now, bring you to September 25th of 2000, or 26th of 2016. How did you learn about Ms. McIver's passing?
I had a couple of missed calls on my cell phone from Tex, and I had a missed call on my office phone. But when I got to work, John Hahn is the one that came to tell me that Diane was, all he said was she was gone, and I didn't know what that meant.
Did you, when you got to work, did you have an opportunity to talk to the defendant on the phone?
I did. After John came to talk to me, I returned his calls.
And when you returned his phone call, were you able to connect with him?
Yes.
And what did he tell you happened the night before and about Ms. McIver?
He just told me she was, if I remember correctly, and I don't really remember because that was not the best day in my life, but he didn't tell me what happened, so I didn't learn that till a couple hours later. So, but I did talk to him. I can't tell you what the conversation was. All he said was, if I remember correctly, was that she was gone also.
Did he tell you that he shot her?
No.
Did you talk with Mr. McIver, the defendant, again that day about what occurred?
I did see him that night at the condo. We didn't talk about it.
Okay. When you said you saw him that night, tell the jury about a little bit why you were at the condo.
Well, I just felt it was appropriate for me to be there. I mean, it was just the thing that I thought I needed to do. So I went.
Did you go alone or did you go with someone?
No, my partner went.
Okay. And what is your partner's name?
Bill. Right.
Okay. And were there other people at the condo that Monday?
Yes.
Evening? Okay.
Yes.
Who else was there if you can remember?
I know Rachel Stiles was there. I know Annie, I'm going to say Anderson, but she's married, so she's got to do, but I know her as Annie Anderson. I believe Ken Rickard was there. Annie Jo Carter was there. Tex was there. There were a bunch of people there. I mean, those are the people that come to mind.
And Annie Anderson, had you met her before?
Yes.
And who is she to the McIvers?
She was their massage therapist.
Okay. And when you got there to the condo, were you able to interact with the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the jury a little bit of the conversations you had with him.
I can't really even remember the conversations. I know at one point that night, my partner is interior designer, and the condo, the second condo, when they put them together, the kitchen was torn out. It was just a big party room with a bedroom. And Tex had asked us what we thought it would cost to put that condo back as a condo, if he wanted to put them on the market.
When you say put that back, you mean split them back up into two condos?
Right, and you had to put the kitchen back in and put it back together.
And sell them separately?
Yes.
And this was less than 24 hours after Ms. McIver?
It was either I went Monday night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. It was one of those 3 nights.
Okay. And did you meet with him?
I did meet with him probably once in October, and I know once in November, because I had to transition her bills. He didn't know what her living expenses were, what it cost to run the condos, all that stuff. She owned them. She paid for that herself. So all that had to be given to Tex.
Before he called you, did he even know where her accounts were?
No.
How much money?
Well, as far as I know, no.
Okay. And while or during those meetings, or explain to the jury what those meetings were about, or what occurred during them.
I collected her bills after she was deceased and went to the condo and took a folder that I had with all of her expenses and bills and stuff in it and explained to him what he needed to do to keep the condo running. I mean, there was condo fees to be paid. You know, the utility bills were in her name, and they came electronically, so we didn't get a paper bill. So we had to call the power company to get all that stuff turned back off so that the paper bill would come, because when she was deceased, the bank locked her checking accounts immediately. So nothing could be paid through her accounts. So we met twice to go through all of her stuff to make sure everything was getting paid, that he understood what he needed to do and what it took to actually run the condos.
And why did you agree to meet with him? You know, it sounds like a funny question. Take a minute.
Do you need a break, Mr. Brown?
I'll be all right. Just give me a minute. It's what my job was, and that's how I saw it. It was very important to me to finish. I'm sorry.
Just take a minute, take a deep breath.
I didn't think it would be this hard. It's been too long. Okay. So that's why. It was important to me to finish her life.
Because her money was so important to him.
It was important to
I'm
her.
sorry, objection.
Stop doing that. Don't argue through your questions. Save that for, if you want to give closing, negotiate with Mr. Ruther and Ms. Conklin.
Okay. We'll talk about that tonight. Did he, after showing him your documents, your spreadsheets, did he say anything about her finances?
Well, he thought she had more money than what she had. He was surprised at the number that was in her checking accounts.
Now, do you know who Miss Janie Calhoun is?
I do.
And do you know where she lives?
I do.
And where does she live?
She lives at Kingsborough Road next door. She has the condo next door to the McIvers.
The McIvers. Okay.
Yes.
And over the years, have you gotten to know her?
Very well. Yes.
And have you stayed in contact with Miss Calhoun since Diane's passing?
I have. I usually see her once a month.
Okay. And were you aware that the defendant and Miss Calhoun in the past have been romantically involved?
Yes.
Your Honor, could we approach?
Okay.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Law and Crime Network. You were just listening to some replay testimony from a critical witness in the Tex McIver murder trial, and that is Terry Brown, the victim's executive assistant that knew everything about the finances, the personal life of Diane McIver. Very important details came out in that testimony. I want to bring in my guest for the afternoon, Andell Brown. We had him earlier. He is a criminal defense attorney out of Florida. And Esther Panitch, she is a criminal defense attorney out of Atlanta, and she has actually been in the courtroom watching all of this unfold. Esther, what did you make of this witness we just heard from before they broke from lunch?
This so far has been the state's most powerful witness. This is somebody who not only knew Diane really well, but also knew Tex really well, not just socially, but financially as well, and has reactions from Tex statements he made, which are strange, and also had a very intimate understanding of the finances that occurred between Tex and Diane, which of course goes to the state's idea of motive, that Tex killed Diane intentionally in order to profit from her death. So so far this is the most powerful and also the most emotional witness. We heard from Janie Calhoun, but she was a little more reserved in her testimony.
So let me just ask you, Esther, about this, and I asked Andell about this. When he kind of broke down a little bit on the stand, if you were in the courtroom, you could kind of give us some insight how the jurors were reacting when he did that. And also, when he talked about the fact that Tex was surprised that Diane didn't have as much money as he thought she did.
Right. So first of all, I am not in the courtroom today.
I'm sorry.
To the live feed. I've been in the courtroom every other day. Just today I'm at a CLE and trying to do two things at once.
Gotcha.
But and even in the courtroom, it's very difficult to see the jurors' faces unless you're sitting on one particular part of the courtroom. Otherwise, the jury is kind of to the side of everybody. So it's difficult to gauge their reactions. But it is fascinating to see the what he said about what Tex said. He responded that Tex was surprised that Diane didn't have as much money as he thought he did. To me, that was oh my God, this is really good for the state, because what was his expectation, that she had a lot of money and that he was going to get all that money? Was it not enough money for him to get out of the hole that he created? Like, what does that mean? And of course, we haven't heard Cross yet. Cross is coming after lunch. And so we're all kind of waiting with bated breath to see how the defense gets this witness.
So, Andell, play the criminal defense attorney here, which shouldn't be hard because you are a criminal defense attorney. What would you do during cross to minimize some of what came out during the testimony from this witness, specifically when it had to do with Tex's reaction to the finances of Diane?
Well, number one, I would question his recollection of the events. I would question his opportunity to have remembered everything clearly, especially when we already know whose side he's on. He's very close with Diane. Obviously, he's suffered a great loss in the fact that she's not here. And a lot of times when people suffer loss, they're looking for someone to blame. And in this case, that's Tex McIver. That may be coloring his recollection of what's going on here. So I think that that's the area I would focus on when it comes to him as a witness. And I think on a larger scale, I would focus on the fact that Tex, as bad as the prosecution may be saying his financial situation is, it was not dire. And the reality of it is that he didn't know exactly what would happen if Diane were to die as far as him financially. So that would be a big gamble for him to take, and as well as his own freedom just to get a little bit of money.
And what about the fact that this particular witness, and we'll get to some of the other witnesses from this morning in a bit, but this one is just so important. What about the fact that Terry, the victim's executive assistant, said the two had a good marriage? See, that's what I'm having a hard time believing this financial motive without the discord in the marriage being presented to the jurors yet. What do you make of that, Esther?
I think that's a really good point. I mean, usually if you see domestic violence murders, there's a history of discord. And here we don't have any of that. So with Tex so cold that he was able to hide his true feelings for Diane all this time up until the time he murdered her, we don't really know. So it is unusual, and it's not like other domestic violence murders that we see. So we kind of just have to see how this whole thing plays out. And I hope for the state, since they're the ones putting up the case, that they have a stronger nexus between the financial motive and the lack of discord in the family.
What do you make of it, Andell? The happy marriage. I mean, don't they have to...
On the defense side, you have to focus on the fact that he did say there wasn't any discord there. Why would someone get rid of a marriage that's working? If he had given her a loan, if she had given him a loan, if she had continued to support his endeavors, there's always going to be ups and downs in a relationship. According to the testimony we've heard, at some point, Tex was the big breadwinner, but later on in the marriage, it shifted to Diane. It's not as if they didn't help each other along the way, and there's no reason to say that wouldn't have continued. So for Tex McIver to go through the extraordinary step of plotting and killing his wife, not only taking her life, but exposing himself to spending the rest of his life in prison over financial means that he didn't really even know about, would be far-fetched.
Yeah, and here's what keeps getting me. I want to get to some of the other witnesses we heard from this morning. But here's one thing that keeps making me question this case, and is why the heck, if you're going to murder your wife, okay, Esther, why the heck would you do it when there was someone else in the car right near Piedmont Park? I think that's where it happened. I mean, that they had a ranch in the middle of nowhere. If you're going to murder your wife, do it then. I don't get that part.
I don't. It hasn't been explained yet if it exists. Bruce Harvey did a great cross without being really adversarial. He was just able to get out from the lead detective at the time that this ranch was in the middle of nowhere. And so if he wanted to harm his wife and give her as much time to die as possible before he could get to the hospital, then certainly anywhere along that route before they got into the metro Atlanta area or downtown Atlanta, he could have probably done it. And definitely there was no help around there. It's not like he had to choose between Emory, Piedmont, and Grady, which are the hospitals around here. There wouldn't have been hospitals for, tens and tens of miles away. So, and certainly not any of those hospitals like a level 1 trauma center. So, it is an interesting point. Plus, if you're going to murder your wife, are you really taking a nap in the car? I mean, is that really what you're doing? Or maybe you're trying to plan or start a fight or something. I don't really know, thank God, but it doesn't sound like you'd just be sleeping in the car on the way to murder your wife. I would imagine even the biggest sociopath would be a little nervous leading up to the time that they're going to execute their spouse.
Listen, I think this is going to be a tough case. It's going to be really interesting to see this unfold. As I mentioned, I want us to talk a little bit about another witness that took the stand this morning, and that is Gail Meadows. She was kind of the front desk woman who worked at Diane McIver's business. She did not know Diane very well, but, and I'll have you guys listen to this first and then react. She described a situation a few days before Diane's death in which Tex McIver walked into the office. Let's take a listen to that.
And while he was in the office, did he say anything to you? No. And I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 156. And could you show on the map where that area is? No, show on the photo which way he walked. Past here? Uh-huh.
Okay, so he came in this way, and I'm sitting here, and walked past here, and then on the other side of that little room that's there.
Okay, and that's where Diane's and Mr. Corey's office is.
Right.
Okay, and you could see this from where you were sitting?
Yes.
Okay, and when he came in, did you say anything to him?
No.
And what were you doing when he came into the office?
Paperwork.
Yes. And describe to the jury how he looked to you.
Angry.
Your Honor, objection. We could instruct the witness just to describe his physical characteristics and not give an opinion as to how he appeared.
So, what's your response to that objection?
I mean, I think she can observe how he appears to her. I don't think it requires any type of special knowledge to it.
I'll allow it.
Could you continue, Ms. Meadows?
He was red-faced. The stern look on him, and it's like I've just not seen too many people that look like that. I'm just saying that he was red-faced.
When she objects, you guys stop.
She's things.
Now we have moved on from describing how he looked to characterizing it, her opinion of how he looked. She said, red-faced, stern look, something like, I haven't seen other people look like that. I asked that the witness limit it to how Mr. McIver appeared physically.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to go on to your next question. I'll allow that, but we're done with the description.
Okay. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 3. And if you could describe exactly how was he red-faced? If you could show me on there.
Well, he didn't look like, I mean, his face wasn't like this, but he was just all red. It was just an all ruddy red face.
Okay, like red, like an apple. If you could describe it, how red?
Okay, Esther Andell, let's talk about this moment because I think it's really important in many ways, but also interesting to talk about the lawyering that was going on when this woman, Gail Meadows, was trying to describe the demeanor of Tex McIver a few days before the alleged murder when he entered his wife's office. Red face, she said he looked angry, he looked mad. Andell, why was there an objection to that? I don't get it. Explain.
Well, because she's trying to peer into the mind of Tex McIver. She can only tell what his appearance was. If she says his face was red, his face looked flushed, that's one thing. But to say he's angry or mad without knowing what's going on in his mind, I don't think that she's in a position to say that.
But come on, the prosecutor was baiting that question, Esther. Of course, she knew that this was how Gail was going to respond. She was doing everything she could possible to get around her, reading the mind of Tex McIver here.
Right, of course that's what the prosecution wants,
Sorry, Esther, go ahead.
We've seen that happen more than once, not just with this witness, but we saw with Terry Brown that the prosecutor kept trying to testify through the witness that about the whole money was important to Diane. And when they weren't allowed to get that in directly, they kept putting the words in the witness's mouth, so much so that the defense objected again. And then the judge actually kind of yelled at the prosecutor, like, okay, enough with that, let's move on. I'm not going to let you do the back way what I wouldn't let you do the front way. So, it's I don't like why the state is relying on this kind of testimony. The reality is nobody knows what they were really upset about, or if he was upset about anything at all having to do with Diane. He may have been upset about something else and was telling Diane, and that got him upset. So I hate when prosecutors just kind of pull things out of thin air and then just try to put them in their case. To me, those are weak points of a case, if that's what you have to rely on.
Yeah,
it's max of desperation. I wish, go with your facts. Go with the facts you have. Don't start, creating or speculating. It just shows, to me, it shows weakness in the case. And even if the case is otherwise strong, there's no need to bring that in.
It's interesting, and I want you to weigh in on this too, because in the scheme of this trial, which is supposed to go on for a while, she is one of the first witnesses, she being Gail Meadows, to testify to this random day where, Tex McIver seemed like he was angry, in her words. Does that a sign that maybe the prosecution doesn't have the strongest case if this is one of the first people they're bringing up? Or, do you think it could backfire on them? What's your take on this witness?
I think what it makes it look like, number one, is that whether their case is strong or not, they may not have the best focus on their theory. Because I really don't understand, and I think Heather pointed out, what relevance this witness has. I would have even objected as to whether this testimony was relevant to anything. They haven't connected it to Tex McIver and Diane's relationship. They have no idea what, if anything, he was feeling that way about. So really this witness and the way it plays into the prosecution's theory of the case seems as if they're just throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. That does not make a strong case. I don't think it convinces jurors, and it makes it look as if they're clutching for straws and they're not focusing on what's really the heart of their case.
Well, and of course, that's going back to earlier in our conversation, which was one of the things that I think jurors are going to grapple with is the fact that everyone so far that we've heard from says they have a good relationship, Tex and Diane. So here you have this woman, that doesn't really know either party very well, claiming she saw him walk in one day and look upset. Well, I tend to agree with both of you here. That's a little bit of a stretch if you have people that actually know them, like Terry Brown, their longtime executive assistant of Diane McIver, saying they had a good relationship here. Esther?
Yes, I agree. I just think it's undermining their theory, and I don't know why they're doing that at this point. So, they don't consult with me, so I can't tell you what they're, there may be a method to this madness. I just haven't seen it yet. So, but we're still very early in the trial. So I guess we'll see. And you know what? They also may not, the prosecutor nor the defense attorneys really control what witnesses actually do when they get on the stand.
True.
It's certainly possible that they thought they would be able to get other things out of these witnesses that just didn't come out. So we don't really know, and we won't really know what this was really about until maybe after the trial, if anyone wants to tell us.
So Esther, my producers tell me you only have 10 minutes with us, so I have to let you go because I know you have to go back to more training. I think you're at a lawyer class today. So I thank you so much for joining us from the Atlanta area. And
yeah.
And if you're back in court, we definitely hope that you'll join us again. In the meantime, hopefully Andell will stick around. Excuse me, for a few more minutes. I just want to give folks a game plan of what's happening this afternoon. If you're just joining us here on the Law&Crime Network, we are in the lunch break for the Tex McIver case. It's a case that we are following very closely out of the Atlanta, Georgia area. Tex McIver, a prominent Atlanta attorney charged with murdering his wife, Diane McIver. He said it was all an accident. Yes, he admits to shooting her. Yes, he admits to the whole thing, but says he didn't do it on purpose, that his gun had a hair trigger and it accidentally went off while he was in the back of a car. While we wait for court to resume in about 10 minutes or so, I want to play, so you can get a sense of the defense's side of this, play some of their openings from yesterday. Let's take a listen.
Now, when Diane McIver and